Good day, I'm Fani LaRue. Welcome to Fantjies Theological Tantrums. This is the fourth video in the series of Why I Am Egalitarian. Please watch the other three first. These videos are for adults, not for children, as I don't mince words and don't sugarcoat issues. Some of what I said maybe are controversial, but I'm asking my questions. Also, as said in my first video, I do sometimes miss things, and I sometimes read things. I write long sentences, and then when I read them, they may not always come through correctly. I admit that, but I believe that the essence of what I say is understandable and clear. Today we go on. Part 4. Marriage. Where angels fear to tread. The husband is the head of the wife. Or rather, the husband is the head of the woman, as in plural, woman. Or perhaps any man is the head of any and all women. Paul said so. But what does this mean? Does this mean, as is most often the case amongst complementarians, that the husband must make all the decisions, or rather has the final say in all decisions? Does the man being the head mean that the man alone must do the finances, all the finances, at all times, and make all decisions regarding the finances? What happens when the wife is better with the finances than the husband? What about when the husband has absolutely no or virtually no financial sense or gifting? And I mean gifting. I've heard it said or claimed that the wife must then get out of the way of her husband and let him do his God-appointed duty with the finance. Is that what the Bible teaches? Is this what the New Testament teaches? You know that the New Testament, which says or claims that God is the one who gives talents and gifts, and even more so, yet not limited to when the Holy Spirit gives his gifts and talents. The man must. Is that what the New Testament and even the Old Testament teaches? What about Proverbs 31? Consider verse 16. She considered a field and bought it from her own income. She planted a vineyard. And verse 18a. She perceived that her merchandise was good. And 24. She made linen garments, then sold them and traded belts to the merchants. Did the husband, the one who is the head of the wife, the one who must make all financial decisions according to quite a few complementarians, or at least okay every single financial decision, do this in what Proverbs describe? Especially verse 16, a fixed asset. Did the husbands of the women, the married ones, look after Jesus, the husbands of the women looking after Jesus and his disciples, give them permission? Did they okay every cent spent on Jesus at all, every time, every place? And what about when those women traveled with Jesus and his disciples at times? These women would not be at home. Are all believers, and also therefore believing husbands and wives, not part of Christ's body, therefore gifted by him for whatever purpose he decided and wants to use his children, his body. Does this analogy found in the New Testament not also flow through to marriages? Must Christian husbands and wives, not even in their marriages, support and bring out and help grow their spouses' God-given gifts? Must a husband who is not good with finances be in charge of the finances? Or should he rather concentrate for the most part on his own God-given gifts and talents? Must I put in calling? What about the cars and or other vehicles? Does the man, being the head of the family, mean that he and he alone, or even mostly him, be in charge of, or always be in charge of, anything to do with the vehicles? What if the wife knows more about and is even able to repair cars, while her husband's God-given gifts and talents lie in other areas of life and ministry? Again, I have heard that the wife, or is it any woman, must get out of her husband's, or is it any man's way, and let him be in charge of and responsible for any and all vehicles. The wife, any woman, may never ever repair vehicles and or be in charge of this. No, only the man. And even when the husband or a man is not good at this, or absolutely clueless about vehicles and or concentrates on his God-given gifts and talents, then he is a sissy or a fool, a rebel and dishonorable and going to hell and whatever else he or they are called. Oh, and the wife is easily then, just as with finances, viewed as overbearing, overstepping her God-given boundaries. Is this what the New Testament teaches us about what God gifts people with? Does God decide, or do we decide? And what about repairing or building or constructing things? Is this just the or a man's job? There are women who are good with this, and men who are not. But no, the wife may not do any of this. The husband or a man must always help, or do it on his own, even if he is not at all gifted with this. Let me ask, is it truly the so much vaunted gender roles, or is it actually the husband's or a man's pride, his ego, prohibiting him from letting a female do any of the above? And when the wife or a woman does any of the above, then the husband's or a man's ego, his pride, is hurt or destroyed. But no, the Bible says, does the Bible say the above? That only the husband or a man may do any of the above or be in charge of any of these? Does the Bible kowtow to our feelings? Since whenever the husband's or a man's feelings are sacrosanct, the husband must, or a husband must, or a man must. It is a disgrace if and when a woman does any of the above, etc., etc. According to whom? Us or God? Especially in the New Testament, when the Bible itself claims that God is the one who gives and provides gifts and talents so the church can grow. Oh yeah, I see. This only applies to the church, not in marriage. But is marriage not for now, until Jesus returns, part of the church? Does the Bible not claim that the relationship between Jesus and the church sets the example for marriages? Is this not what complementarians and others say? Do God-given gifts and talents not then in marriages, as in the church, decide who does what? And Jesus is God, not a mere man. The men must set the chairs in the church building. And dare a man say, "No, I cannot help you with this," then he is demonized and slandered. A woman helps. Are there no men in this congregation? And or does that woman have no shame? Is her husband God? Is a husband or any man able to do all the things expected of him? What happens when the husband or a man does not have the God-given gifts and talents that people expect him to have? How many boys have been taught that music and the arts are for women, not for men? How many boys have been forced to work in gardens or on farms when their God-given gifts and talents lie elsewhere? Cars, finances. Does the list ever end? You just want to do what you want. Lazy brat. Life does not always work out as you want it. Man up. But let me ask this in a different way, which also has to do with the above. Do Christians help each other in areas where one or some do not have the God-given gifts and talents as others? Do Christians with God-given gifts and talents recognize and allow others to live out and use and grow their own God-given gifts and talents? Or do we expect everyone or most to have the same gifts and talents? See, according to Jesus' parable on or about gifts and talents, each person will have to give account of their use of their own God gifts and talents to God the Son. Lovely, right? We decide how and when and where brothers and sisters, no, brothers in Christ must use their gifts, and not only in the church, everywhere. Complementarians, complementing each other. Christians complementing each other. Husbands and wives complementing each other in marriages. What does it mean? Do and must we as Christians not then complement each other with our God-given gifts and talents so that the whole body of Christ can grow and be healthy everywhere? But we decide. Some Christians, and here also some Christian men and women and Christian husbands and wives, must concentrate so much and so hard on pleasing people by concentrating on areas of life and church which are not their God-given gifts and talents, that they neglect and are expected to neglect and even bury their own God-given gifts and talents. No, women who have the God-given gifts and talents to teach congregations and or men are forced to teach children, etc., etc., or no one. Because Paul said so. In marriage and in life, husbands, men must do X, Y, and Z. Wives, women must do A, B, C, regardless of whether or not they have those God-given gifts and talents, and or whether or not their spouse, other members of congregations or even greater church, may actually have those God-given gifts and talents that they themselves lack. Is this what the Bible teaches us? Submit to one another. Insofar as you do not have the God-given gifts and talents, you submit to your spouse or a brother which do. Does this mean that Christians do not make mistakes? Whether man or woman, husband or wife, even when living out and growing, etc., their God-given gifts and talents, Christians can and will and do make mistakes, and they sin also. Can mistakes, sins, even by some, disqualify a whole sex? biological sex from living out their God-given gifts and talents? Is this what the Bible teaches? Does the fact that you are the leader or manager mean that no one else may make decisions? That none of your subordinates may make decisions, even make decisions which you as the leader do not directly affirm with a yes? But this is how marriages are expected to work. The husband must make all the decisions or decisions of certain kinds, even when the husband does not have the ability, the God-given gifts and talents in certain areas. But no, marriage is not a company, not a business. And yet God himself even allows his children to make decisions. He gives gifts and talents in different areas to different people. And they have to use these and make decisions with his help in those areas he had gifted them. Shall we look at ministers again? Ministers must do all things. And the congregations, the minister must be in charge. Meanwhile, he does not have all the gifts necessarily. The military. Only men may fight on battlefields in the military. Or according to others, only men may serve in the military. This is what the Bible teaches, right? God does not want women to fight in wars. This is what the Bible commands. If I follow this reasoning to the end, then God did not want any wars anywhere, not in heaven and not on earth. God did not even want men to fight in wars, but because of Satan's fall and the fall of man and sin in all men, wars occur. Yes, in the Bible, God used the men to fight and die in wars. Why? Well, women had to stay at home and bear children and raise the children, didn't they? This is what God had commanded women to do in the beginning. And when in Judges 4, Barak, a man, dared to ask Deborah, a woman, to go with him, he was punished with a jail. A woman would kill Sisera. Not him, not Barak. As stated before, Deborah, Barak, and especially Jael is slandered and berated and rebuked and cursed for what happened. But Deborah was at least the prophetess of God, wasn't she? And the prophet, in this case prophetess, represented God, didn't she? And did it not happen before and later that military leaders of Israel, Israel, also at times asked prophets or priests to go with him into battle, showing or proving that God was with the army? At times it just happened. Did not even Moses ask or tell God to not let the Israelites move on unless he, God, went with them? And then visibly as a cloud column or a column of fire, depending on the time of day. Did not the Ark of the Covenant often at times go before the people into battle at the beginning? If I had lived at the time of Barak and was ordered by a prophet or prophetess to go fight against an enemy, and I truly believed in God, as Barak did, I would most probably, most likely, have done exactly what he did. But oh yeah, I am a sissy, not a man. But let me be a bit more blunt. If women, all of them, were so easily deceivable and untrustworthy, etc., etc., and a female prophet, a prophetess, claims that God had ordered me to go into battle, then would I not have wanted her to come with me to prove that what she said is or was true? Isn't this the evidence of being a prophet? Why and how would I have trusted this woman daring to speak on behalf of God? And in the above instance, God did in the end use a woman to kill Sisera, regardless of how we feel about it. And if you look at how the one king was killed by an assassin. This is what Jael did, just in the previous chapter before Deborah and Barak. Women must stay at home and have kids and look after the kids. I mean, raise the kids. Today, even complementarians berate, etc., men, and more so women, who are absent from home for extended periods of time. Businessmen and women, and especially soldiers, often are away from home for long periods of time. Children, especially boys, need fathers. Fathers must be at home, or at least involved. This is why children, especially boys, become unruly, delinquent, and evil, etc. The absent fathers and mothers are responsible, right? Always. Always. When I read this statement, I do in part agree with you. It has been shown repeatedly, and yet the Bible does not provide this as an excuse for children to become lawbreakers. We even read that a child, a boy, but I think it's both, a boy and or a girl, should be stoned in certain circumstances. In the Bible, we read about so many wars and battles where men had to go fight. Many, most in quite a few cases, died. In one instance, we read that God repeatedly had the enemy kill 1,000 men after God himself had ordered them to go fight. How many boys and girls had been left fatherless in the Bible's history? Just in Israel and Judah, and of course Israel after the divide, Judah and Israel. We also read that even David was a very bad father, even though he was there. Ditto other men in the Bible. What do we teach our children? Do we teach our children that good behavior depends on a father and or mother being present? Or are children taught that God expects them to behave in certain ways, regardless of parents being there or absent? Yes, I know that some children can and may and do develop psychiatric problems when their fathers and or mothers are absent, whether physically or just emotionally or spiritually. But this does not excuse the children's behavior. The Bible do also rely on fear of punishment to stop people from sinning, even children. Fear of being stoned for being unruly or disobedient and disrespectful may just stop many children from acting the way they do. And then there's the instance where Elisha cursed a group of boys or young men for mocking him. Those boys were then killed by 2 bears. I know there's a huge disagreement about how old the boys or young men were. On the one hand, I see our modern sensibilities active when reading this. No, God would not punish young boys or children in such a distasteful or horrible way. Never. Really? And yet men, women and children were quite a few times slaughtered at God's command. But children may do anything? Even the laws of their country and some other countries basically allow children to do of our country, South Africa. And some other countries basically allow children to do whatever they want without consequence. A few years ago, there was a law pushed in South Africa that children under 12 cannot and may not be criminally charged. They cannot and may not be arrested. This is now law in South Africa. Murder, rape, etc., etc. goes unpunished. Because even children can and do rape and murder, etc., other children and other people, not just children. Because another question is this just in South Africa that happens? When I look at American programs, how it is not just in South Africa, because the horrifying things that bullies do in American schools. Now, in South Africa, that happens as well. What fear is there? None. Students, children in schools may say and even do virtually anything to their teachers. Many, more and more teachers leave the profession because of children's behavior. But I guess such teachers are just cowards, right? Or such teachers are just themselves responsible for how their students behave. They're just bad or poor teachers. They are unable to truly reach the student. Bad teachers. And then the parents also come into play. I have a few cartoons or memes where the artist showed the difference between some years ago and now. For a long time in the past, the teachers were given the benefit of the doubt. Today, the child is given full ears, and the teachers are always the bad guys. Yes, teachers can also be problems. But today, those poor little children are always just misunderstood. You cannot and may not blame the children, right? It is always the adults, always the parents' fault. Charge the parents, right? And now parents are sued and or criminally charged for their children's actions. Then there's the so-called and much debated age of accountability. When do God start holding children accountable for their actions, for their sins? Is this why I have heard some Christians believe and proclaim that when even Jesus was a child, he had sinned? He would have sinned, right? He was just a child, right? And we all know that all children sin. Add to this that many Christians today, and even in the past, do not really believe that Jesus was God. Still God, from the beginning of his incarnation. That means in the womb already. The Bible teaches us that the sacrifice had to be completely without fault, without blemish. And Jesus was the sacrifice for all our sin. And this would then include all our sin from the womb until death. But who cares? Yes, having absent fathers and mothers, and not just mothers, can and do often lead to children becoming problems. But this does not excuse sin. It does not excuse bad or evil behavior, words and deeds. But let us not forget one other decree by many complementarians. Only the man, the husband, may work. He must provide for his family. Then I hear how some complementarians state or order that if a man cannot do this financially, he must even get a second and or a third job or a fourth one in order to provide. But what happens then? My mom's dad had for a long time worked from morning to night. As a girl, she often did not see him at all for days at a time. And he worked one job outside the home, and at times did books for people when at home. Time with the children, for the children. I see and hear how many people, both men and women in America, have second and even third jobs just to keep the lights on. Sorry, to have scraps of food on the table. Time for your children. And now let me be brutal. Where are all the big-mouthed Christians, especially complementarians in this instance, who owns businesses and run companies, etc., etc.? Because how do Christians treat their slaves? Their workers, their employees. Do you pay your workers enough to go home after working for you, to go home and spend some time with their children? Oh, but they work 2 or 3 jobs, some while studying, just to barely survive. Now all Christian men must do that. Because I did it, someone else must also always do it. Must the minister or pastor rather go and do other work and or get one or two more jobs just to make ends meet? Yeah, right. In South Africa, she now has contracts. How high can you jump? Germany, jump higher. And those contracts often stipulate that you are there 24/7. So now you get another job. Oops, somebody's going to be angry with you. And is that what God expects? But we don't care about others anymore. Back to my main point. Having the wife or woman stay at home with the children does not guarantee children will not go off the rails. And the Old Testament actually teaches that the husband, the man, is responsible for raising righteous children. If one wants to be pedantic on only men fighting in wars and men being at home with their wives to raise kids, then actually all wars must stop. May I add that all crime must stop. In South Africa, the criminals have won. Every day, criminals are fighting battles against unarmed civilians, civilian men, women, and children, and against the very few armed ones. Our government now wants to take away all privately owned guns. Thousands of men, women, and children are murdered in South Africa. Oh, and many criminals in South Africa now torture their victims before and during slaughtering the victims. Many children being left parentless or motherless or fatherless or just slaughtered. We may not defend ourselves, but the man must. If I read the Bible, I must say that there were times in the Bible that sounds quite a lot like times in South Africa today. Again, I ask, is it a good excuse for children to go off the rails when their parents are absent, whether physically or mentally, psychologically? Can I understand what happens? Yes. But we have turned it into a soppy excuse. May women fight in war? As I've stated earlier, I believe that in the New Testament, having children are optional. To have children is not the new creation command. Therefore, I do not believe that women are walking, talking uteruses, only good to stay at home and have children. And even in or during the old creation command, I wonder if this view of women is actually what God wanted, or intended, or commanded. I do not know if the words were in the original book by Tolkien, but in the one film, a female character states that even those who cannot fight with a sword can die by the sword. Is this true? Yes. Throughout history, the above fact has been repeatedly proven true, even in the Bible. Yes, men are in general stronger than women. But does this fact disallow women from fighting in battles or war? Let me first go to general issues, before returning to wars. I have heard some men complaining about women being engineers or building contractors and many other physical or partly physical professionals because women are not as strong as or have as much endurance as the men. The women cannot carry as much load or lift such a heavy load, etc., etc. And yet, even the male engineers and building contractors, etc., sometimes need help to lift or carry, etc., heavy or ungainly things. And what happens when some male engineers or building contractors, etc., can also not or may also not do certain things or carry or lift heavy or ungainly things because of health issues and others, mocked, slandered, etc.? Should those who can, those who are their colleagues, not just go and help lift and or carry, etc., the heavy or ungainly thing? Help each other. Help each other, regardless of sex or physical problems. Now he's a man. He can do it himself, right? We find a very interesting verse in Nehemiah 3 verse 12, where the wall of Jerusalem was being repaired and rebuilt. Shallum, son of Haluhesh, head of a half district of Jerusalem, worked on the section adjacent to him, assisted by his daughters. Note 15 of the NET states. The reference to daughters, while not impossible, is odd in the light of the cultural improbability that young women would participate in the strenuous labor of rebuilding city walls. All other such references in the book of Nehemiah presuppose male laborers. Not surprisingly, some scholars suspect a textual problem. One medieval Hebrew manuscript and the Syriac Peshitta read, and his sons, rather than the Masoretic text reading, and his daughters. Some scholars amend the Masoretic text and his builders. On the other hand, the Masoretic text is clearly the more difficult reading, and so it is preferred. First, may I ask, I guess the Old Testament text critics may crucify me for daring to use such disputed verse. But the Septuagint tells us, and next to him repaired Shallum, the son of Alois, the ruler of half the district round about Jerusalem, he and his daughters. So the Septuagint has the same as the Masoretic text. Relevant and disputed, as in most cases. Therefore, cannot and may not be used, right? Rai Ripa. Back to fighting wars. Especially in sports, the physical differences between the two sexes can most often be seen very clearly. And many sports are effectively hand-to-hand combat fighting. These physically show and prove that most women do not have the physical strength and or endurance of most men. But does this mean that women may not fight in battles or wars? I believe that the more equipment we have that we battle with, the less important and less valid the differences between sexes are. Just the fact that you can fire a gun or an arrow from a distance already changes the equation. Also, on the YouTube channel Valhalla VFT, which I mentioned previously, Kanakia mentioned in one video that even quite a few special forces soldiers are not good at hand-to-hand combat and may even be killed by unskilled or semi-skilled enemies. I did not know this. I remember watching the Under Siege films with Steven Seagal. Apparently these films were not quite accurate. Some special forces soldiers do have the skills, others do not. Some women are stronger than some men, though weaker than most. But combat skills may even level the playing field in some instances. If a man who has no training in, for example, mixed martial arts is put against a woman who are well trained, the woman may just beat the man, though the size of the man may make a difference. But then, I do have some other relevant questions. Wasn't David much smaller and weaker and less trained than Goliath? And didn't Gideon beat a huge army with only 300 men? Did similar situations not occur quite a few times in the Old Testament? The heart of the matter is, who decides which side wins and which side in a war loses? Does the winning depend on how many soldiers you have and how big they are and or how well equipped they are? Did God not say that He can and will and do and did make even the weakest soldier defeat many? Did God not say and show that he can or did make even the strongest soldiers flee? When God wanted to punish Israel first, and then Judah, Israel, the divided kingdom later, did he not often use enemies in battle? When God decided that someone would lose, even skill and strength and superiority and numerical superiority and technology counted for naught. Is God still able to do this? I ask this. Do we that say we are Christians really still believe that God can do this? We talk a lot. What do we really believe? Believe with our hearts, with our minds. Oh, but our wars are just human wars, having nothing to do with God, right? Does God even care about our wars and battles today? Or is he just looking down or looking about, never intervening? Are all physical wars on this planet just irrelevant human decisions, which anyway have no effect on God's plans, which will always turn out good for those who believe in him? When evil, such as the Nazis and the Japanese horrors, were taking over the world, did God care what happened? Did God intervene? I have learned from many different sources that if America had not joined the war, Europe and Britain and many other places around the world would now, perhaps still, have been Nazi states. Who allowed Japan to become so proud, so foolish and so arrogant to attack Pearl Harbor? Was World War II just a human war? Or was there more to it? But just men fought, right? I have heard from some Christians that all such wars and all the wars between Christian kingdoms and Christian denominations were just physical human wars, not bothering God, and therefore again ask, are all human physical wars of no interest to God? Do God still intervene at all when his children are fighting wars, or just having their lives threatened? Are none of our wars and none of our battles important to God? But why should God intervene when not even his children believes that he should? And what about those few times when Israel, this one kingdom, and then Judah, Israel, the divided kingdom, just watched God do the fighting? Didn't one normal angel, not even the angel of God, Jesus, kill 185,000 men? Does physical strength in hand-to-hand combat still mean that much? I've heard quite a few stories from the mission fields, especially from during the Zimbabwe-Rhodesia Civil War, where the enemy's attackers saw beings protect some of God's children. Not everyone, some. Just the presence of these beings either prevented attacks or disabled the attackers. When God wants, does he not still command his angels to protect his children? When it is in his will to do so? Also, when I hear the excuse that female soldiers who are caught may be horribly tortured, raped, etc., etc., I often wonder if people saying this forget how horrendously men can and are and have been tortured throughout history. Men can be sodomized, and their genitals can also be mutilated. And then we have not even started with so many other torture techniques. Men, women, and children are and can be and have been horribly tortured throughout history. Are women worth more than men in this equation? For children to be conceived, must not the woman and the man be there? When men are murdered, is it less evil than when women or a child is murdered? This is how it seems, because we don't care about men being murdered anymore. I thought men are supposed to be there if they are fathers? Do we care? Is this what the Bible teaches? In the ancient past, which member of the family were the most important? Why? The men were the most important. They had to spread their seed, their genes around. They had to spread and continue the family lines. They knew where their lines went, who their great-grandfathers or their forebears were. In Israel, it was vital if you were a priest, or whether or not you were an Israelite, a Jew. Wives could be replaced, and or more wives taken to do the above. If a wife died, I just take another one, because the man is the responsible one. It's his line. Children could be replaced. More children could be born. But when the dad died, his line died out. I hear that male soldiers just can't stand seeing or watching female soldiers be wounded or tortured, and then forgetting and or ignoring their training, and then get killed or wounded or captured themselves. I believe that this is psychological and should be trained for. Though this makes things more complicated, it is still an excuse. How did Christian men feel when Christian women were tortured and killed in front of them or were with them? When a father had to watch his wife and his children die, being tortured and slaughtered before him. What about in those arenas in the circus of Rome, when wild animals were set on them? Did they give up? In the New Testament, all Christians are at war with the enemy. Both male and female Christians are fighting in a war. Are just male Christians commanded to put on the whole armor of God? Thankfully, I have not yet heard such a claim from complementarians. But it comes close sometimes. Both male and female Christians must put on and wear the whole armor of God. Both male and female Christians use and must use the sword and the shield, must they not? Fighting wars, or a war. Both male and female Christians are attacked by enemy forces. Both must defend themselves and each other and others, and even attack the enemy. I have seen pictures, memes, where only fathers are commanded to defend their families. Is this right? No. Together, mothers and fathers and even children defend their families against enemies. And then let's get to one more fact. Have only male Christians become martyrs for Christ? No. Both male and female Christians have died for Christ. Both male and female Christians have been horribly tortured and slaughtered for Christ. Both male and female Christians throughout the time since after Jesus' resurrection and his ascension, up until the present, have made the decision to rather die than to give up their faith. A choice had been given to many Christian men and women, and they chose to be tortured and murdered rather than give up their faith. Eve and Adam chose sin. Many men and women choose to not give up Christ. The author of Ecclesiastes states in Ecclesiastes 7 verse 28, "What I have continually sought I have not found. I found only one upright man among 1,000, but I have not found one upright woman among all of them." Is this not what also the people, most Jews and Christians of Jesus' day, and even up until the Reformation and afterwards, believed, and some still believe? Yet women are martyred for Christ. Women are faithful and upright, etc., unto death. Mary was upright and faithful, was she not? Anna? What about the women at the cross and at the tomb? And those women supporting Jesus and his disciples out of their own means. If women can make a choice to be tortured and die for Christ and to not give up their faith, then Paul's reason as being that Eve sinned, etc., etc., becomes even more null and void in the New Testament. I remember once reading that during the time when Bibles in people's own languages were forbidden, yet available, a young girl was walled up because she chose not to give up the Word of God. A girl, a female, chose. If a woman is married, must she wait for her husband's okay to die for Christ? If a woman must teach men or others together with men when they are waiting to be executed, who cares? Is this what Paul said? I agree with Karnakia that close quarters living can be problematic when male and female soldiers stay and live and fight closely together. Especially small teams, such as Special Forces soldiers, do often sleep and live virtually on top of each other during deployment. Karnakia states the fact that the above easily leads to or can lead to soldiers having sex with one another, despite some militaries prohibiting this. When soldiers who are married to non-soldiers or soldiers in other units, etc., sleep with other soldiers in their own units, etc., commit adultery, marriages easily become ruined. Unit cohesion can also falter or be destroyed when the soldiers sleeping together start having relational problems. One is angry with or being jealous of the other, etc., etc. If this in everyday life may already lead to problems and disasters in all areas of life, then under the stress of military life and active deployment, this can be even more disastrous. However, we are back again to the fact that this happens and can happen anywhere in life. It even happens in churches, in congregations. And this has and still do and will in the future destroy families and congregations, and then people leave the church or faith and just do not become Christians. But even in marriages of couples working together for God, relational problems can cause serious problems for ministries. But then we as Christians say we must forgive. We must bear with one another, etc., etc. But these, I guess, are again just empty words. Though I agree with Karnakia, especially where living conditions of special forces soldiers are concerned, I believe that if a woman do pass the stringent and exhausting and brutal selection process for special forces soldiers, then they should be used in such capacity. I also agree that for these types of soldiers, the toughness of the training should not be lessened, diminished, just to accommodate women. But let's get back to theological training. What does toughness of it mean? Apologists like Frank Turek, aren't there some women who do exactly the same thing? What about Charlie Kirk? Aren't there women who do the same things? Should I ask if Christian men and women should be given different biblical training? Men must learn one way. How about one thing, women another? Or is it that the Christian men should be provided a different level of biblical training than Christian women? Is this not what the rabbis, etc., believed and taught? Well, That is if you allow women to have any biblical training at all. Is this what the Bible as a whole teaches? Is that what Jesus taught? What the whole of God's command taught or teach? But then I have to remember what I have heard a few women complain about, and I've watched some YouTube videos online where it shows how some women's Bible studies are often a farce. Watered down Bible study, if at all Bible study. Is this, and Paul, why some denominations do not even permit women to lead women's Bible studies? Men's Bible studies, women's Bible studies. We as Christians often cannot and do not even apparently want to study God's Word together. Grow together in the faith. But perhaps the problem is rather that we do not trust each other. Because just perhaps Bible studies may start stepping on toes. Or perhaps it is the fact that we cannot and do not want to speak clearly and openly about so many issues in front of one another. We separate from each other. We use euphemisms. If women are where men are, specific euphemisms are used and the opposite. But then the one thing I talked about earlier may actually be the most important reason. If women are at the men's Bible study and seminaries and other, perhaps the men will have to ameliorate and moderate their responses and attitudes. They won't be able to slander each other, even physically punch each other. And the stopping of such behavior, actions and words are so bad, so evil. But what about at women's Bible studies? What if the same happens? And slander? Perhaps not often physical fights, but aren't there other spheres as well? Or are Bible studies, whether men's or women's, actually places where the husbands and non-married men and wives and non-married women can complain about and even slander their husbands or wives, etc., in the name of, I just need to blow off some steam? Learn together? How about train together in order to fight together? No, never. But again, God can even make an untrained person a great or brave, etc. soldier or fighter. We first get back to something I mentioned earlier in this video. Quite a few cultures where special forces soldiers are deployed and out do not accept women as soldiers and leaders. These cultures are often old, ancient cultures, believing and practicing what cultures throughout the ages practiced, including the cultures of Jesus' day. But does or should this fact just disqualify any woman from becoming a special forces soldier? Does the female special forces soldier have the wisdom to understand and accept that she will mostly not be deployed to such cultures except under very specific circumstances? Yet, she or they may just be useful even under the above circumstances. Second, whomever you are, sleeping with someone who is not your spouse is sin. And though certain stresses are found more on the battlefield or deployment, some or most of that stress is and can be found in nearly every day of life. Have some or many men with secretaries or personal assistants not slept with them, since such jobs have been given to women? What about slaves? Let's not go there. In Jesus' time, in the father's times? Oh yeah, but then it is the women's fault, right? Always. And immediately women should be stopped from being secretaries or personal assistants, right? What about their female colleagues and business partners, etc.? What about cleaning? Unfortunately, before this time and even now, if the man wants to sleep around, he will ditto women, cleaners, air hostesses, etc., etc. Not to mention those paid for services, were and are slept with. Is normal life not then even worse than the military? Sleeping with a superior officer to get promoted? Only female soldiers do this, right? Or it is the fault of the female officers when the female officers sleep with male soldiers of lower rank. And sleeping with a superior officer's spouse only happens with female soldiers, right? And it happens nowhere else in life? Why is it that in life and in military, females must and do sleep more with male superiors, whether such are superior officers or bosses, etc., etc.? Are these females seen for their gifts and talents and hard work and then rewarded for it? Or are they only seen as their sex and sex objects? And that's a choice men make. How about in churches? This happened too often as well. Shall I now bring South Africa's race-based laws, which also at times lead to the above? Who must you sleep with to get ahead? Who did men and women have to sleep with during apartheid to get ahead? And now, men and women? Yet Galatians 3 verse 28 says, there is no Jew or Gentile, no slave nor free, or male or female. But we may never believe this or put this into practice. Sex. I believe that in part the problem is that most of us first or only see a person's sex before looking at them as just being a human or image of God, and we don't see them as human at all. We just see a gender or a race or a nationality and other parts of Galatians 3 verse 28. Just an employer. Oppressor, right? Yeah. Not seeing them as human at all. I often hear Christians and some non-Christians stating that we are sex obsessed. And I believe this is a fact, even in our churches and our faith as a whole. Do we as Christians first see each other Christians as brothers in Christ? Or do we first or only see them as men, women, black, white, brown? May I ask if humans are only sex obsessed now? But what do I and we expect if the first creation command is to have kids and fill the earth? This command has to do with sex, and it has implications for the two sexes involved in having sex and procreating, having children. Men spread their seed around, and women carry and bear the children. Two sexes, each with their specific gender roles to bear children and fill the earth. But did those who believe or believed in God after the fall truly fulfill the above command? Until, I believe, Christ gave the new creation command. No. Or perhaps they did fulfill it enough that the rest of God's redemption plan could and did go ahead. Christians often decry sex education. But Christian relations in marriages and marriages fall apart. Yes, sex education must be age appropriate and teach Christian values of abstinence till marriage, etc. But do Christian men and women ever really learn how to help and pleasure each other? Do Christian men and women take each other into consideration in marriages? Or is sex still for the most, or for many, true Christians, actually just business. What about the only business? Marry and fulfill your duty. Have kids and fill the earth. But what is age appropriate? The age when most people marry is getting higher and higher. It is women's fault, right? Those ambitious women who do not want kids or want to follow their careers first before having kids. Or it is those men's fault who do not want kids or do not care if women have careers or just do not want to marry or are just too sissy or rebellious to marry, right? All their fault or our fault. Now we sit with a few problems. The age at which boys and especially girls mature either decreased or stayed the same, depending on who you listen to. And yet the age at which they get married now increases. The time between these two is problematic for many people. According to many Christians, especially complementarians and others, women now have even less children. Yet Sarah had only one, and others only had one or two, as pointed out before. The sexual urge did not decrease for most people. But for longer and longer, Christians especially must wait before having sex. Now more and more Christians, is it just progressive Christians, allow for people to just live together. Others do not even care if people have sex, even outside the previous mentioned relationship. Another problem is that for most of human history, especially girls, sometimes boys, were married off as soon as they had reached sexual maturity. Young girls, 11 to 13 years old, and 14 and 15, etc., were married to older and even much older men. Today, this would be and is part of what is called pedophilia and others. And this practice is prohibited in most countries and also prohibited and decried and viewed as sin by Christians. Yet Mary, the mother of Jesus, was most likely anything from 11 to 17, with the most probable age given as 40, when having Jesus and marrying Joseph. In South Africa, a law was proposed that would have raised the age when people could marry to 21. Well, on the one hand, in the US, I believe that people may only legally start buying, or is it drinking, alcohol at 21. Yet as far as I know, they may marry at 18. In South Africa, the age is 18 for both. What confusion is sown when on the one hand the person is already viewed as grown up enough and may make life and death decisions, while on the other hand, not being viewed as an adult, age 21. A stupid question. How do we bring up our children? What do we teach our children? Most important, how do we live and behave and believe in front of our children? Now, it's behind their backs also. When you are in your private place, when you're not with them. Unfortunately, children often know what their parents are doing anyway and how they live when they're not with the children. For such a long time, people got married even before turning 18. Young women were 16 or 17 or younger, and the young man or young men sometimes the same age or a bit older. They could legally get married. In South Africa, after a certain point, I do not know which year, to get married at 16 or 17, the parents' consent was needed. And in rare cases for younger girls, the state's permission. As far as I know, these last two exceptions are not allowed at all anymore. What happened in America? I don't know. Now girls, just like boys, are supposed to go to school, college, until they are 18. Supposed to, in South Africa. Girls, just like boys, learn subjects to enter careers. In South Africa, the goal of many is to go to university, though colleges and others are also options. The goal is or was to have both girls and boys at certain educational levels so that they could enter into and contribute to the economy. Can I say into the family? Dare I also say to realize their dreams? No, girls may not dream about designing and building things, being doctors, etc., etc., right? Some complementarians do allow this now, others don't. Women must stay at home. When reading what many or most of the people of Jesus' day and after believed about girls and women and education, even religious education, I wonder on the one hand if many Christians, especially complementarians, do not yearn back to those days. Life was much less complicated. Men did this, women did that, sometimes. At other times, men did a lot of that as well. Then later it was sissy stuff again. Women must do that. Most girls were married off as soon as they reached sexual maturity. Getting rid of and preventing them from becoming too educated and perhaps wanting to teach or follow other careers. They, most, were kept busy bearing children and looking after kids and taking care of kids and looking after the household. No other education required than knowing how to clean and how to cook and how to sew, etc., and how to bear children. Except Proverbs 31 requires something more, doesn't it? But who cares? At least today, girls can and may learn over the internet also, which was not available before. I hear how some educators, even Christian educators, state that it is not good for girls and boys and young men and young women to learn together in schools and or classes. You see, boys or young men just want the girls or young women to impress and get the girls or young women. And the girls, young women, just want the boys. And no, girls or young women outperforming boys and young men academically is just not acceptable. Therefore, separate the boys and young men and the girls, young women. Separate classes or even separate schools. Neither may girls or young women outperform young boys or young men in any other field. If a girl or young woman beats a boy or young man in any field, the boy's, young man's, fragile ego is affected for the worse. Don't ever teach them how to work together. Don't ever teach them that there is virtually always someone, whether of the same sex as you or the opposite, that is better than you. No, men must always be better than women. Most boys and young men are taught this. And they see this and are taught this, whether explicitly or implicitly, also in complementarian churches and to a certain extent still the broader society. I believe that for physical sports where direct physical contact or physical strength and or in some cases physical endurance is required, there may and should be, in most cases, separation. However, in virtually all other fields, today men and women are on equal ground. And our children, both boys and girls, young men and young women, must be taught to work together and learn together and respect one another for their God-given talents and gifts. Do we teach our boys and young men that girls or young women are actually still just sex objects? Only there to bear children and to raise children and take care of the household? How about emotional and unintelligent? How do boys, young men, see older Christian men act towards women? Or let me put this differently. When there are no women around, what do boys and young men hear and see Christian older men say and show about women in general, and especially their wives, but daughters as well. Yes, I can throw this the other way as well. When there are no men around, how do girls and young women see Christian women talk about, point out, and show about men in general, and especially their husbands, but sons as well? And yes, numerous times I've had the unfortunate privilege, when not being seen or even seen, to personally hear and observe how some Christian women spoke and speak about and showed about and complained about and slandered especially their husbands when talking to their Christian friends, even at church functions and Bible studies. In quite a few cases, the whole Pacific and Atlantic and Indian Oceans together would never be able to wash their husbands clean afterward. Is this what the Bible expects of us and commands us? See, evil wives, evil women. Now let me throw this around again. But it is not just women who do this. Women are not the only ones who gossip or complain. I've also had the very unfortunate privilege to hear and observe how Christian men do exactly the same. Yes, quite often women in general or other specific women are discussed and even torn apart, etc., etc., but also their wives. Forgive, cover each other's shortcomings, help one another, help each other grow and thrive both physically and mentally, and thirdly, spiritually? Or is this the first? No, we won't. How about in church? All women are and must be and must. All men are and must be. Paul said so. Do boys, young men, see older Christian men be jealous of women? Do they see that when a woman beats a man in any area of life, that older Christian men, and women too, slander and denigrate the beaten man, or even more so the woman? What happens when children see that people's, whether men or women, God-given talents, and even God the Holy Spirit-given talent and gifts, are discounted and ridiculed and sidetracked and even buried by the church? Not by the gifted, by other people, Christians, by the Christian male leaders and female followers. If you have a gift or talent, spirit gift, and you constantly and always see and hear that because of someone's sex, that person may not use and grow, etc., their gift or talent or spirit gift, and you have that gift and are of the same sex, would you really show or tell, or want to show or tell, that you have such and such talent or gift or spirit gift? I quite often watch YouTube videos by Frank Turek. One series regarding archaeology and the Bible, which is now only available to be seen in a paid course, was at first a men-only Bible study. Later only was asked whether women could also attend, and permission was given. Women's Bible study, men's Bible study. Should I ask if only men would have been interested in the above topic, the archaeology, the provability, that? Men have such and such interests and learn in such and such a way, and our Bible studies are shaped, or should be shaped, to accommodate them. Women have such and such interest and learn in such and such a way, and our Bible studies are shaped and should be shaped to accommodate them. What about those men and women who are not normal, according to others? Those men and women who are interested in the other things and or learn differently. Let me go further. For decades, because men worked and women stayed at home, women's Bible studies were held in the mornings. The times when my mother did not work, she led one such a group. The men worked. Very few of them were ever interested in Bible studies. Men are and were tired when they came home, sometimes often to the frustration or exasperation of the wife, who had also worked very hard, albeit at home. If my memory serves me correctly, no men's Bible study, which was held in the evening, was ever really supported. The minister did all the preparation, all the work. It was his job, interest. After all, he got paid for it. And one or none teached. Yes, you can study the Bible if you have only 2 people. But then it should and could be done in a different way. And I guess it is, as always, the minister's fault that no one was interested. He just didn't do a well enough job, or he himself was a problem, etc., etc. I've downloaded a whole lot of audio Bible studies that Wayne Grudem held over a few years at the church in America in the early 2000s. If I understand correctly, it was compulsory for the adult members to attend those Bible studies, which were held from about an hour before the Sunday services. In the video, The Lie of Polygamy, exposed biblically, logically, and ethically with At Inspiring Philosophy by Melissa Doherty and uploaded on 14 November 2025 on her YouTube channel with her name, Melissa discusses polygamy with Michael Jones of Inspiring Philosophy. At around 14 minutes, Michael states that God had allowed some things in the Old Testament that is not ideal and was outlawed by the New Testament. God had compromised in order to meet people where they are or were. The main issue in the video is polygamy, but another such issue is slavery, according to Mike. First, slavery is the second of 3 issues mentioned in Galatians 3 verse 28. There is neither Jew nor Greek, there is neither slave nor free, and there is neither male nor female. Shall I now tick next to neither slave nor free? But yet again, if some complementarians or the complementary understanding of this verse is correct, then it is only spiritually as dealing with saved by Christ and the resurrection of the dead. Nothing else. It does not ban slavery. Is polygamy then also just spiritually wrong, outlawed? It took about 1700 etc. years to even begin to get slavery banned. Officially, as far as it is, it has not been completely eradicated. So, just like in the Old Covenant, in the New Covenant, God again just compromised as far as slavery is concerned for more than 1700 years. So just like in the Old Covenant, in the New Covenant, God again just compromised as far as slavery is concerned for more than 1700 years. But if this is true, then what about the first and the third parts of Galatians 3 verse 28? No, it is not that Christians sinned by not following the verse that upended the whole shebang. No, God just compromised again. Since after Constantine, Christians, or so-called Christians, had been the leaders of the West, or so-called Christians, yet they took nearly 1400 years before even beginning to get rid of slavery. God allowed polygamy because it was the culture. God allowed slavery because it was the culture. And no, Christians after Christ and the Israelites or Jews before them could never ever go against the culture of their day on these issues. It would have been too much to expect of them. Yes, for 3 centuries about, Christians were anyway persecuted and murdered for just being as countercultural as they already were. But let's dig into this more. Quickly. Though it may be that if Christians had gone in guns blazing from the beginning against slavery, etc., the faith may have been rooted out at the beginning. If one compares the culture surrounding the Jewish religion and Christianity, then I wonder if the real reason God compromised on these issues is not perhaps that God wanted people from the surrounding cultures to also follow and believe in and obey, etc. If God had banned certain cultural practices in the Old Testament, even many Israelites or Jews might just have walked away immediately. They were human after all, following customs and culture ingrained in them. The same applies even more so for the New Testament. How many people, especially men, would have come to Christ if the whole religion was even more countercultural, as it already was? Did God therefore compromise? Watch Melissa's video from around 17 minutes 10 seconds. I have a question there. God had compromised in the Mosaic law to meet the people at their level. The Old Covenant therefore contained compromises. What about the New Covenant? Paul was a Jewish Pharisee in a male-dominated culture. I've already mentioned examples. I ask again, how many men would have come to Christ if women in that culture were allowed to teach in church and or become leaders of the church? Paul himself, writing God's absolute law for the new covenant as Moses had the second time, written down the Mosaic law, God's law, but compromised in Moses' case. Paul, a man of his time, as Moses was a man of his time. Why could God not in this case also have compromised? Michael adds that God could have just changed everything instantly, but people's free will would then have been violated. Yep. Men, culture dominated by men, products of their time. So following this reasoning, what they mean about women in the church? But no, it never ever was because of human culture. Paul said so. Complementarians using these for egalitarians outlawed concepts and tactics, etc. when it suits them. Rai Ripa. In the video by Alyssa Childers, Gender Isn't a Spectrum, It's God's Design with Dr. Jeff Myers and Dr. Kathy Koch. In Afrikaans we say Koch. Alyssa Childers uploaded this video on 10 November 2025. From around 35 minutes 25 seconds, the discussion is about where the word gender comes from, and the video centers on transgenderism. Jeff Myers looks at the background of the word gender. He states that the word comes from the Greek word genus, which means kinds of thing. As found in Genesis 1, God made everything according to its kind. He gives the example of cats, lions or tigers or house cats, etc. Thus, species. But then he goes to Genesis 1 verse 27 and goes on to state that male and female are the kinds of human beings, and that different races and facial structures and nationalities are not different kinds of people. He says that all human beings bear God's image. Today the language is highly problematic when talking about gender. Jeff and Kathy had to be extremely careful and wise in their book as to which words to choose. However, to use the word kinds when discussing the two biological sexes creates other bigger problems. Are men and women different kinds of humans? Jeff already made clear that humans of different races and nationalities and facial structures, etc., are not different kinds, And when providing cats as example, different species such as lions, tigers, and house cats are mentioned. Yet the two biological sexes of one species, humans, both of which God created in its own image, are suddenly of different kinds. I've never heard anyone use the word kinds when speaking about different sexes in any species, though, as I have said in a previous video, this is virtually the net result of what some complementarians believe and state and argue for. When speaking about species, kinds of cats are lions, margays, tigers, cheetahs, servals, leopards, etc., etc., not the sexes of the animal. Oh, we find two kinds of cats, males and females. We find two kinds of humans, males and females. An unfortunate word choice. Yet from what I have seen and heard, for many a complementarian, not necessarily the participants in this video, but for many a complementarian and others, this would be a Freudian slip or an open public statement of what they really believe. Men and women are different kinds, different species. Did Jesus only come to die for men's sins, the biological male's sins? Jesus came as a human being to die for Adam's sin. Jesus had to come and die and be resurrected as a human being because Adam was human. No other kind of being, whether spiritual or physical, no other physical species are saved through what Jesus did and said. Even the sinning angels are not and was not saved. Human beings, the bearers of God's image, are saved. But Jesus came as a man. No, women and men are not different kinds. Both are humans. Both are and have been created in God's image. Perhaps the word choice was just unfortunate, and most likely some poor word choices is found in this video by myself as well. Or is there here also a sliding scale moving up and down as it suits the need? Only where salvation is concerned are women humankind, right? As found in complementarian Galatians 3 verse 28. Everywhere else, they are not as humankind as men are, right? Or as image of God as men are, and as glory of God as men are. Yet Jesus came as a human being and he died for humans, for both men and women. Conclusion. 114, 117 pages now of 12-point aerial script with 1.5 line spacing. A few videos later, 4 videos. I hope and pray that I have conveyed why I am egalitarian. Biblically egalitarian. Earlier this year I made one introductory video, and it took me more than a year to write this video. These videos I'm doing now. A very, very difficult more than a year. No, these videos are not as polished as Mike Winger's or so many of the others. And no, it does not have slides. Maybe one day. Just one talking head this way. Just a few days ago, another video of someone I respect, Ferdy Mulder, was uploaded to YouTube, in which it is again claimed that if you are not complementarian, you do not believe that the Bible is the Word of God, and you do not respect it at all. No, all my arguments only come from emotion. And yes, I did admit that I am emotional. Am I a Bible-believing Christian? Just like any good sectarian, I believe that I am a Bible-believing Christian. Right? Some or many of my arguments may be weak or subjective or emotional or all. And yet some are not. I believe that all the arguments together do make a biblical case for egalitarianism. A biblical case for women on the pulpit, women as ministers and pastors and elders, etc. In this text, are these videos as comprehensive as perhaps they should be? No. Most likely, more can be said. Certain arguments can definitely be better developed and evidenced and discussed and explained and argued for. And of course, rebuffed or rebutted. In some cases, I may have most likely made mistakes in how I read it. Long sentences, I do sometimes make mistakes with. But, Dio volente, Dio fiat, Dio vi. I hope to be able to again make other videos now. Therefore, until next time, till we meet again, may God bless you and show you His grace and mercy and give you His peace. Goodbye.